After my wife's funeral, the landlord of her old counseling office called me at midnight. "Pastor Mitchell, you need to come here now," he said. "There's something hidden in Grace's desk. And whatever you do, don't tell your daughter." His voice was shaking. I drove through the rain, hands trembling on the wheel. When I opened that secret drawer, my legs gave out. My wife wasn't dead. And my son didn't kill himself. I'm truly grateful you're still here with me. Before we continue, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. It means more than you know. And I read every single one. Also, please note, this story includes some fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is meaningful and worth hearing. 3 days after we buried Grace, I sat in the living room of our Nashville home staring at her empty rocking chair. 46 years of marriage, and now the silence hurt my chest. The house smelled wrong without her. No lavender from her morning tea. No hymns hummed from the kitchen. Just a thick, suffocating nothing that pressed down on me like wet earth on a coffin lid. I kept replaying the funeral. Calvary Hill Baptist Church had been packed. 200 faces. But something nagged at me. My daughter Faith and her husband Vincent had arrived late. They hurried across the cemetery, Faith's heels catching in the soft November earth. Vincent gripping her elbow like he was steering a ship through a storm. During my eulogy, I caught Faith's eye, and she looked away immediately, pressing a tissue against dry cheeks. Vincent stood rigid beside her, jaw clenched tight. He didn't cry, didn't bow his head in prayer, just stared at the casket with an expression that looked almost like relief. At the reception, they left within 40 minutes. "Daddy needs his rest," Faith had said, though I had said no such thing. What I needed was my family around me. But they were gone before I could finish my first cup of coffee, Vincent practically pulling Faith out the fellowship hall door. Day 3. No calls, no texts, nothing. The phone rang at 11:47 that night. Shrill in the dead quiet house. "Pastor Mitchell." The voice belonged to Clarence Johnson, CJ. He owned the building where Grace had run her counseling practice for 15 years. We had served together in Vietnam back when the world was young, and we were foolish enough to think we were invincible. "CJ, it's nearly midnight." "I know, Harry." He paused, and in that pause I heard something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Fear. CJ Johnson, the man who had walked point through the Mekong Delta without flinching, sounded afraid. "I found something in Grace's office, a hidden compartment in her desk." "What kind of something?" "Can't say over the phone." "You need to come here. Now. Tonight, CJ. I'm 73 years old and it's pouring. Harry." The way he said my name stopped me cold. Like a sergeant calling attention before delivering news that changes everything. "Grace left this for you. And Harry, don't tell Faith. Don't tell Vincent. Don't tell anyone." My pulse kicked hard. "Why not?" "Because Grace made me promise." A shaky breath. "She said your life might depend on it." The line went dead. 73 years old, and I could still feel adrenaline flood my system the way it used to in the jungle when somebody yelled incoming. That cold electric rush that sharpened everything down to survival. This could be a trap. At my age, I wasn't the Marine I had been 50 years ago. My knees ached, and I got winded climbing stairs. But CJ had said Grace's name, said she left something, said my life depended on it. I grabbed my coat and drove into the November rain. 20 minutes later, I stood at the back entrance of the building on Broadway. The stairwell smelled like old books and lavender. Grace's scent. It had soaked into these walls over 15 years and refused to leave. Just like her memory refused to leave my mind. CJ waited at the top. His face told me everything and nothing. He led me into Grace's office. Dark, except for a single desk lamp, casting long shadows. He crouched behind the desk and pressed something underneath. A click. A drawer slid open from what I had always thought was solid paneling. Inside lay a manila envelope, a small digital recorder, and a letter in handwriting I would recognize anywhere on this earth. Grace's handwriting. My legs gave out. CJ caught my arm, steadied me into Grace's old chair. "Read it," he said. I opened the letter with trembling fingers. The first line blurred through sudden tears, then sharpened into focus like a rifle scope clicking into place. "My dearest Harry, if you're reading this, then my plan worked and everyone believes I'm dead. I'm not. I'm alive, and I'm safe with CJ. But I had to disappear because the truth I discovered would have gotten us both killed." I stopped breathing. Our son Elijah did not die of a stroke. He was murdered. And the man who killed him sleeps in our daughter's bed every night. The room tilted. I gripped the desk until my knuckles went white. Read those sentences again. And again. Elijah, my firstborn. The boy who became a lawyer to save the world one case at a time, who died 2 years ago at 35 from what doctors called a massive stroke, who I preached a funeral for, standing at the same pulpit where I had dedicated him to God as an infant. Murdered. By Vincent. I looked up at CJ. He stood by the window, arms crossed. He nodded once, confirming everything. I looked back at Grace's words. My hands had stopped trembling. Something old and cold had taken over. The same thing that kept me alive in the Mekong Delta when the world exploded. Not rage. Not yet. Something quieter. More dangerous. Purpose. I turned the page. The next page of Grace's letter outlined dates, names, bank accounts. But I never finished reading it. Because the door behind CJ's desk opened, and a woman stepped into the lamplight. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The shape of her, the way she stood with one hand resting on the doorframe, head tilted slightly left the way she always did when she was studying my face for signs of trouble. The silver hair pulled back in that simple bun she had worn every day for the past 20 years. Grace, my wife. My dead wife. Standing 10 feet away from me, in a room that smelled like her lavender and old paper. My knees buckled. The letter slipped from my fingers and floated to the floor. CJ grabbed my shoulders from behind, kept me from going down completely. But I barely felt his hands. The world had narrowed to one single point. Her face. Her eyes. Those dark brown eyes I had looked into on our wedding day. When our children were born. When we buried my mother. When we buried Elijah. "Harry," she whispered. That voice broke something inside me that I had been holding together with wire and willpower for 3 days. Tears came. Hot. Sudden. Unstoppable. I hadn't cried at the funeral. Hadn't cried when they lowered the casket. Hadn't cried once in 2 years, not since Elijah. I had preached to my congregation about the healing power of tears while keeping my own locked behind a dam I thought would never break. It broke now. I don't remember crossing the room. One moment I was collapsing in the chair, and the next I had my arms around her, pulling her against me so hard I was afraid I might hurt her. But she held me back just as fiercely, her fingers gripping my shirt, her face pressed into my neck, her breath warm and real against my skin. She was solid. She was alive. Her heart beat against my chest in that steady rhythm I had fallen asleep to for 46 years. "How?" I managed. The word came out broken. I watched them lower the casket. I threw dirt on it. I heard it hit the wood. She pulled back just enough to look at me, cupped my face in her hands. Those hands that had held mine through every storm our life had weathered. I had to, Harry. If Vincent knew I survived, he would have finished the job. Just like he finished Elijah. Hearing it from her lips made it real, in a way the letter hadn't. I stepped back, my legs finding strength I didn't know I still had. Wiped my face with the back of my hand. Sat down because if I didn't, I was going to fall down. "Tell me everything," I said. From the beginning. Grace pulled a chair close to mine. CJ locked the office door and leaned against the wall. Arms folded. Silent. Guarding. 8 months ago, Grace began, her voice steady and precise, the way it always was when she counseled someone through crisis. A man came into my office for marriage counseling. Tommy Watkins, 76 years old, Vietnam veteran, hands shaking so bad he could barely hold his coffee cup. I knew Tommy. We had served in the same battalion. Good man. Quiet. The kind who never asked for anything. He told me his retirement savings were gone. All of it, $47,000, stolen through a Veterans Assistance Fund that promised low-interest loans but delivered nothing except empty accounts and forged signatures. Grace's jaw tightened. He was ashamed, Harry. Ashamed to tell his wife. Ashamed to tell his friends at the VFW. He thought it was his fault for being foolish enough to trust. What does this have to do with Vincent? Even as I asked, my stomach was already dropping. Already connecting lines I didn't want to connect. Tommy mentioned the name of the man who ran the fund, a charming man, well-spoken, who attended church regularly, and quoted scripture like he was born with a Bible in his hand. Grace's eyes locked onto mine. Vincent Keller. The name landed like a grenade in a foxhole. Silent for one eternal second. Then, detonation. No. I shook my head. Vincent runs a financial consulting firm. He manages retirement portfolios. He steals from old soldiers, Harry. Grace's voice was iron now. 47 veterans that I've identified so far. All over 65. All trusting. All targeted through churches and VFW halls across Tennessee. She pulled the manila envelope from the desk and spread its contents between us. Bank statements. Transfer records. Forged signatures. Total confirmed theft. $1.8 million. Funneled through shell companies into accounts controlled by a man in Memphis named Tony Russo. My mind was racing, connecting, reconstructing. And Elijah found out. Elijah was representing Tommy Watkins pro bono. He traced the money, discovered the shell companies, found Vincent's name on incorporation documents. Grace's composure cracked, just barely, a tremor in her lower lip. He confronted Vincent privately, gave him 1 week to turn himself in, and Vincent killed him. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. My son, my boy who fought for justice with law books instead of rifles, who believed the system worked if you worked it honestly. 3 days after that confrontation, Elijah collapsed in his apartment. The autopsy said stroke, massive cerebral hemorrhage brought on by chronic stress and overwork. Grace laughed, but there was no humor in it. He was 35 and ran marathons, Harry. He didn't have a stroke. Vincent put something in his coffee that morning when he stopped by to supposedly apologize and work things out. I felt my hands curling into fists on my knees. The kind of slow, deliberate tension that used to come before a firefight. How do you know this? Grace reached behind her and produced a leather journal, worn at the edges. Elijah's handwriting on the cover in that neat, careful script I had taught him as a boy. Every detail documented, every transaction traced, every meeting with Vincent recorded with dates and times. He kept this hidden in my office, Grace said. In the same compartment you found tonight. He told no one except me where it was, and he only told me a week before he died. Her voice cracked. He said, "Mom, if anything happens to me, this journal is the evidence. Get it to the FBI." But I never got the chance, because 3 days later my son was dead, and I didn't even know this journal existed until 8 months ago, when I finally cleaned out that desk. She placed the journal in my hands. I looked down at Elijah's writing. His final words. The last entry, dated 2 days before his death. Dad always said a soldier keeps records. So I'm keeping them. Vincent Keller has stolen $1.8 million from 47 veterans. He works with Tony Russo in Memphis. If something happens to me, save Faith. He's not who he pretends to be. Save Faith. My daughter. living under the same roof as the man who murdered her brother. I looked up at Grace. What else? She took my hand. There's more, Harry. About your money. About what Vincent tried to do to me. And about what we're going to do. About all of it. Her grip tightened. But first you need to know this. Vincent has a gun. He keeps it in the nightstand beside my daughter's bed. And if he finds out I'm alive before we're ready, he will use it. I opened Elijah's journal and began reading from the first entry. My son's handwriting filled every page. Precise. Methodical. The same careful documentation I had taught him when he was 12 years old, and I showed him how to keep a field journal during our camping trips in the Smokies. Write everything down, son, I had told him. Facts matter. Details save lives. He remembered. Week 1. Tommy Watkins came to my office today. Shaking hands. Couldn't look me in the eye. Said he lost his entire retirement through a veterans fund. $47,000 gone. I told him I'd look into it. Pro bono. No veteran should lose his dignity along with his savings. Week 3. Trace the fund paperwork. Shell company registered in Memphis. Signature on incorporation documents belongs to Vincent Keller, my sister's husband. My stomach dropped when I saw his name. Checked twice. 3 times. No mistake. Week 5. Deeper investigation. Found 46 other victims. All veterans over 65. All recruited through church events and VFW meetings. Total theft confirmed at $1.8 million. Money flows through 3 shell companies to a man named Tony Russo. Memphis-based. Known associate of organized loan sharking operations across Tennessee. Week 7. Vincent isn't just a thief. He's the front man. Russo provides capital for predatory loans. Vincent provides the face. The trustworthy son-in-law of a Baptist pastor. The man who quotes Ephesians at Sunday dinner and steals from old soldiers on Monday morning. I turned the page. My throat was closing. Week 8. Confronted Vincent today at his office. Closed the door. Laid out everything. Bank records. Shell companies. Victim names. Gave him 1 week to turn himself in. Told him I'd help him get a reduced sentence if he cooperated. He cried. Said he got in over his head. Said Russo threatened his family. I almost believed him. The entry was dated 11 days before Elijah died. The next entry was dated 2 days before. Week 9. Something's wrong. Vincent called 3 times today. Friendly. Too friendly. Wants to meet for coffee. Tomorrow morning. At my apartment. Says he wants to discuss how to approach Dad together. I don't trust it, but I'll go. If this is the last thing I write. The evidence is in Mom's desk on Broadway. Hidden compartment under the left drawer. Dad always said a soldier keeps records. So I'm keeping them. The final words hit me like a boot to the chest. Save Faith. He's not who he pretends to be. I closed the journal. Set it on my lap. Stared at the wall. Without seeing anything for a long time. The coffee, I said. Vincent put something in his coffee that morning. Grace nodded. The private investigator I hired confirmed it. A compound called sodium azide. In small doses, it mimics stroke symptoms perfectly. Nearly undetectable in a standard toxicology screen. Rapid onset. By the time paramedics arrived, Elijah was already gone, and the doctors just accepted it. Stroke from overwork. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. I had accepted it too. Stood at that funeral and preached about God calling Elijah home early. Told myself my son worked too hard. Cared too much. Burned too bright. Everyone accepted it. CJ said quietly from his post by the wall. Vincent played the devastated brother-in-law. Called 911 himself. Cried at the hospital. Held Faith while she screamed. I thought of Vincent at Elijah's funeral, dabbing his eyes, squeezing my hand, telling me Elijah was the best man he ever knew. And all the while, my son's blood was still fresh on his hands. There's more, Harry. Grace's voice pulled me back. She reached into the envelope and pulled out bank statements with my name on them. 6 months after Elijah died, Vincent began transferring money from your retirement account. Small amounts at first. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Always when you were at church or visiting Elijah's grave. She spread the statements across the desk. Red circles around transaction after transaction. $180,000, Harry. Gone. Moved through the same shell companies to Russo. 180,000. My military pension. My savings from 40 years of ministry. The money Grace and I had set aside. For whatever years God still had planned for us. Gone. Stolen by the man I had welcomed into my family. The man I had married to my daughter in my own church. How did he access my accounts? He forged your signature on transfer authorizations. Used the power of attorney Faith signed when you had your knee surgery last year. The one that was supposed to be temporary. Grace's jaw clenched. He kept a copy. I felt sick. Not just angry. Physically ill. The room seemed to pulse around me. Now tell me how you faked your death, I said. Because if I didn't change the subject, I was going to put my fist through the wall, and I was too old to be breaking bones. Grace straightened. Back to business. The counselor in her taking over. 3 months ago, I confronted Vincent. Privately. Stupid, I know. I thought I could reason with him the way Elijah tried, and he tried to kill you. He put sodium azide in my afternoon tea, same compound he used on Elijah. Her eyes hardened. But I'd been watching him for weeks. I saw his reflection in the kitchen window when he dropped something in my cup. I switched it with a sedative doctor. Robert Chen provided. Robert Chen. The medical examiner. Retired medical examiner. Old friend from my grief counseling group after Elijah died. Grace almost smiled. He's the one who signed my death certificate. The sedative mimicked death convincingly enough to fool the paramedics. My heart rate dropped to almost nothing. Skin went cold. Pupils fixed. You let me bury an empty casket. The words came out harder than I intended. I let you stay alive. Her eyes blazed with a fire I hadn't seen in years. If Vincent knew I survived, he would have come after both of us. This way he thinks he's won. He thinks he got away with murdering our son and his mother-in-law. CJ spoke up. We've spent 3 months building the case. Quietly. Everything verified. The private investigator, the bank records, Elijah's journal. It's airtight. Then why do you need me? I asked. Though somewhere in my gut I already knew the answer. Grace picked up the small digital recorder from the desk, held it between us like a grenade with the pin half pulled. Because we need his confession, Harry. Recorded. On his own lips, admitting what he did to Elijah. The journal and the bank records will support a prosecution, but a recorded confession guarantees it. She placed the recorder in my palm. Cold. Solid. Like holding a weapon. We need you to go back into that house and make him talk. I looked at the recorder. Looked at my wife. Looked at the journal with my dead son's final words. Save Faith. And our daughter? I asked quietly. What about Faith? Grace's expression shifted. Pain. Deep. Maternal pain. She doesn't know, Harry, about any of it. Vincent has her so controlled, so twisted up in his version of submission theology, that she believes questioning her husband is the same as questioning God. Then we save her too, I said. The words came out like a vow, like a prayer, like a battle cry. Grace placed both hands on mine, wrapping them around the recorder together. Are you ready for this, Harry? Because once you walk back into that house, you're walking onto a battlefield. I met her eyes. 46 years of marriage. She could read me. Like scripture. I've been on battlefields before, I said. And I've never lost a war I was willing to die for. We spent the next 3 hours turning CJ's back office into a command center. The rain had stopped outside, but I barely noticed. The grief that had weighed me down for 3 days had burned away. In its place was something I hadn't felt since 1969. The cold clarity of a man with a mission. "We need 3 things," I said, standing over CJ's desk where we had spread a hand-drawn layout of my house. "Opportunity, evidence, and an exit strategy. If everything goes sideways." Grace watched me from her chair with that expression I remembered from our early years. Pride and concern woven together. "The opportunity is money. Vincent is desperate." I tapped the desk. "CJ, how much does he owe Russo?" 400,000. Deadline already passed. Interest. Compounds. Daily. Good. Desperate men make mistakes. I sketched the framework on a legal pad. We dangle something irresistible. Grace's estate. A trust fund big enough to solve his Russo problem in one stroke. Grace leaned forward. 3.2 million. The exact amount in the Calvary Hill Building Fund. Vincent knows about it because he's been on the church finance committee for 2 years. She pulled a folder from behind the filing cabinet. Legal documents already prepared. The trust comes with a competency requirement. If you're found mentally incompetent within 6 months, funds freeze for a decade. If you maintain competency, full control transfers to you. The beauty hit me immediately. He needs me functional enough to sign but vulnerable enough to manipulate. He has to keep me alive. It buys you time inside that house, CJ added. Time to gather evidence. I moved to the second point. The recorder is good, but I need more coverage. CJ produced a small bag from his desk. 2 thumbnail-sized microphones and a modified Nokia phone. Prepaid. Untraceable. Plant these in the house. Living room and kitchen. They transmit to the Nokia, which stores audio continuously. 72 hours battery life. I took the Nokia. Cold and solid like carrying a sidearm. Communication? Text updates only. Never call unless genuine emergency. He wrote on a slip of paper. Code phrase, if you're in immediate danger. Text the words. Grace's hymnal needs tuning. Law enforcement arrives within 2 minutes. Which brings me to law enforcement. Detective Maria Santos, Grace said. Nashville Metro Homicide. She was assigned to Elijah's case before the medical examiner ruled natural causes. Called me twice after the case closed asking questions. Grace's voice carried certainty. I reached out through CJ last month. Told her everything. She's ready to move when we signal, but she needs the confession to justify reopening. The plan was solid. 3 components interlocking like gears. Money for bait. Technology for evidence. Law enforcement for the hammer. But there was one component left. The performance, I said quietly. I need to convince Vincent I'm falling apart. He's smart, Harry. If he suspects for 1 second, I let my shoulders slump. Let my face go slack. Eyes drifting unfocused. Voice thin and uncertain. I just miss her so much. Some days I can't remember what day it is. I keep thinking I hear her in the kitchen. I straighten back up. Grace's eyes were wide. My God, Harry. 40 years of pastoral care. I've seen every form of human pain. I know how to wear it. I paused. Vincent will see a broken old preacher who can barely remember his own sermons. He'll have no idea he's looking at a Marine planning his takedown. The clock read 3:47 in the morning, rain pattering against windows like nervous fingers. One more thing. I crossed to Grace and took her hands. The hands I held on our wedding day. When Elijah was born, when they lowered his casket into Tennessee clay. You have to stay here. Hidden. No contact with anyone. Harry, if Vincent knows you're alive, we lose everything. He runs or comes after us both with nothing to lose. I gripped her fingers. Right now, he thinks he won. That's our only advantage. Tears filled her eyes. The first, since she revealed herself. You're asking me to let you walk into danger while I hide. I'm asking you to trust me. I was a Marine once. Infiltration. Intelligence gathering. Knowing when to strike, I pulled back to see her face. Can you trust me? She searched my eyes. 46 years. She could read every truth written there. Be careful, Harry Mitchell. I just came back from the dead. I can't bury you for real. You won't have to. I kissed her forehead the way I did every Sunday before stepping to the pulpit. But this time the prayer I whispered wasn't for the congregation. It was for us. For Elijah. For Faith. For 47 old soldiers who trusted a wolf dressed in church clothes. CJ drove me to my truck at 4:15. Dawn still an hour away. Mist hanging low over Broadway like the city was holding its breath. Harry. He caught my arm. Face grave. Vincent killed your son. Tried to kill your wife. He won't hesitate with you. I know. I met his eyes. Old soldiers. Old friends. But I've been dead inside for 2 years, CJ. Since Elijah. Since I believed my son died of weakness, instead of courage. I opened the truck door. I'd rather die fighting for truth than spend one more day in that recliner believing lies. He nodded. God be with you, Pastor. He always is. Even when his timing makes me want to cuss. CJ almost smiled. Almost. I drove home through pre-dawn mist. Nokia in my coat. Recorder in my shirt. 50 years of survival instinct humming in my blood. In a few hours I would walk through my own front door and become the most convincing actor of my life. A broken old preacher. A confused widower. An easy mark. Vincent Keller had underestimated Elijah's courage. Underestimated Grace's intelligence. Now he would underestimate a 73-year-old preacher with bad knees and a warrior's heart. That would be his last mistake. I parked in my driveway at 6:30 that morning and sat behind the wheel for a full minute rehearsing, letting the mask settle over my face like a second skin. Shoulders down, eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open the way people look when their minds have gone somewhere far away and can't find the road back. Vincent's black Lexus sat in my garage. They had already moved in. Faster than I expected. Faster than a normal son-in-law would have moved into his grieving father-in-law's home 3 days after the funeral. But then, nothing about Vincent Keller was normal. Everything was calculated. Every kindness had a price tag. Every prayer had an angle. I shuffled toward the front door. Let my feet drag on the concrete. An old man broken by loss. The door swung open before I reached it. Faith rushed out and threw her arms around me. Her perfume hit me first. Too sweet. Too heavy. Like she was trying to mask something underneath. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Daddy, we were so worried. Where did you go? Over her shoulder I saw Vincent standing in my living room. In my house. His smile was perfectly calibrated. Concerned son-in-law, devoted family man. But his eyes didn't match. They were measuring me the way a butcher measures a cut of meat. Just driving around, I mumbled. Let confusion cloud my voice. Couldn't sleep. Thought I heard Grace calling me from the kitchen, but she wasn't there. I blinked slowly. She's not coming back, is she? Faith's face crumpled. Vincent's smile widened. He thought I was breaking down. Good. Let him think that. You shouldn't be alone right now, Dad. Vincent stepped forward, smooth as oil on water. Faith and I talked about it. We're going to stay here for a while. Help you through this difficult season. I let my chin tremble. That's real kind. Grace would have liked that. Of course, Dad. He squeezed my shoulder. His hand was warm and steady, and it took everything in me not to break his fingers. Family takes care of family. The doorbell rang at 10 that morning. Perfect timing. Attorney David Reeves stood on my porch, briefcase in hand, expression appropriately somber. Tall man. Silver hair. Voice like aged bourbon. He played his role flawlessly. Pastor Mitchell, my deepest condolences. He shook my hand with both of his. May I come in? I need to discuss Grace's final arrangements with you. I led everyone to the dining room table. My Bible sat in the center where it always had. I noticed Vincent glance at it, then away. Interesting. The Bible made him uncomfortable now. It should. Reeves opened his briefcase with practiced ease. Grace made arrangements before her passing. Thorough arrangements, as was her nature. He pulled out documents thick with legal language. Pastor Mitchell. She consolidated her entire estate into a trust fund valued at $3.2 million. Church investments, insurance policies, and property holdings accumulated over 46 years. I kept my eyes on the papers, but every nerve in my body was tuned to Vincent's presence like a radar dish locked on a target. In my peripheral vision, I saw his jaw go slack for half a second. His eyes widened. A flash of something primal crossed his face before he masked it. Hunger. Raw and naked. And barely contained. $3.2 million. I could practically hear the calculator running behind his eyes. Russo's debt. $400,000. That left $2.8 million clear profit. A new life. Clean slate. All he needed was one confused old preacher's signature. However, Reeves continued, and I watched Vincent lean forward almost imperceptibly. There is a competency clause. Grace wanted to ensure the funds would be managed responsibly. If within 6 months Pastor Mitchell is deemed mentally incompetent by a licensed professional, the trust freezes for 10 years. No access for anyone. Competent, I repeated, letting the words sit awkwardly on my tongue. Yes. I think I understand. Vincent spoke up, trying to sound casual, but his voice had gone half an octave higher. What exactly constitutes competency in this context? Ability to manage daily affairs, make informed financial decisions, comprehend complex documents. Reeves rattled off the criteria. Standard neurological evaluation. Grace wanted to protect her husband from potential exploitation during his grief period. That last word hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Exploitation. Reeves delivered it without looking at Vincent, but I could feel it land. A muscle twitched in Vincent's jaw. Once. Fast. Reeves spent another 20 minutes covering details. Interest rates. Disbursement schedules. Tax implications. Vincent asked 3 more questions, each one carefully worded to seem like concern for me, but really probing for weaknesses in the trust structure. Reeves answered them all without giving an inch. After the attorney left, I watched Vincent through half-closed eyes while pretending to doze in my recliner. His mask slipped for maybe 2 seconds. His gaze tracked the departing car through the front window, and I saw it. The predator beneath the prayer, calculating odds, measuring weakness. "Dad, you should rest," Faith said. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Yes." I let my eyes drift closed. "I am tired. So tired." I retreated to my bedroom, closed the door, pressed my ear to the heating vent that connected to the kitchen below. The old house had thin walls and good ventilation. Sound traveled through these ducts like whispers through a confessional. Vincent's voice came through clearly. Low. Urgent. Excited in a way that made my skin crawl. 3.2 million, Faith. "Do you understand what this means?" "Vincent, Daddy just lost Mom. Can we please not? Listen to me." His voice sharpened. A blade wrapped in velvet. "Russo wants his money by Friday. 400,000. If we don't pay, he doesn't send letters. He sends people. Do you want that?" Silence from Faith. Then, barely audible, "No. Then we need your father to sign power of attorney. Before the competency evaluation. Before some doctor decides he's too far gone." A pause. "Look at him, Faith. He's already slipping, calling your name by your mother's name, wandering at night. We just need to guide the process. He's grieving, Vincent. He's not incompetent. Not yet." Something in those 2 words chilled me more than the November air outside. A promise, a plan, But grief does things to old minds, especially when they're not sleeping well, not eating properly. I pulled back from the vent. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. Rock. Steady. The way they used to be when I chambered around in the dark and waited for what was coming through the tree line. He was going to weaken me, deprive me, break me down until I either signed willingly or deteriorated enough to be declared incompetent. Then, he would take everything. That night, I lay in bed listening to the house settle around me. At 2:17 in the morning, footsteps stopped outside my door. The handle turned slowly. Testing. Then silence. Then footsteps retreating. He was checking whether the sheep was asleep, whether his prey was docile and unaware. I smiled in the darkness and wrapped my fingers around the Nokia under my pillow. Texted CJ 4 words. Bait taken. Game on. He didn't know. This wolf had walked into the shepherd's house thinking he owned it. But shepherds protect their flock. And this shepherd had teeth. I woke to pale morning light and the sound of my own hand trying the door. The knob turned, but nothing gave. Locked. From the outside. For 3 seconds I stood there processing. Then I tried again. Same result. The deadbolt that had never been on my bedroom door was now firmly in place. I could feel the resistance through the handle. Someone had installed it while I slept. That meant tools. That meant planning. That meant Vincent had come prepared to make me a prisoner in my own home. His voice came through the door. Smooth. Concerned. Perfectly pitched for an audience of one. Sorry about this, Dad. It's for your own safety. You were wandering again last night. Faith found you trying to open the front door at 3 in the morning. We can't have you getting lost in the cold. I hadn't wandered anywhere. I had been in bed all night listening to him test my door handle. But I said nothing. Just pressed my palm against the wood and let out a confused whimper in part of the act. All of the act. Can I come out for breakfast? Faith's bringing it up shortly. Just rest, Dad. We're taking care of everything. His footsteps retreated down the stairs. I counted them. 14 steps to the first floor. Good. I'd know when someone was coming. I turned from the door and surveyed my bedroom the way I had surveyed every position I ever held in Vietnam. Not as a room. As a battlefield. Every object. A potential asset. Every surface. A potential advantage. The window. Second floor. 12 feet to the garden below. Soft earth from November rain. Survivable drop if I hung from the sill first. Functional latch. Escape route confirmed. The floorboard near the radiator. I stepped on it and heard the familiar creak Grace had complained about for 20 years. I crouched down, worked my fingers into the gap, and pried it up. Hollow space beneath. 6 inches deep. Enough to hide the smaller recording device. I pulled the thumbnail microphone from my sock, where I had concealed it last night, and placed it carefully in the hollow, angled toward the door. Any conversation in the hallway would be captured. The wooden cross on the wall above my bed. Solid oak. 18 inches long. Heavy enough to crack bone if swung with conviction. I lifted it from its hook, tested its weight, then hung it back, within reach from the bed. A weapon of last resort. There was something darkly appropriate about it. The cross, as both salvation and defense. My old Bible on the nightstand. I opened it to the hollowed center where I had carved out the pages 3 hours ago in CJ's office. The Nokia fit perfectly inside, invisible to anyone who didn't open to the Book of Psalms. I powered it on. 1 bar of signal. Enough. Battlefield prepared. Faith brought breakfast an hour later. A single slice of toast. Lukewarm water in a paper cup. Not enough to sustain a man my size, but enough to avoid the appearance of outright starvation if anyone ever asked questions. I recognized the tactic immediately. Deprivation. Isolation. Controlled feeding. Weaken the body. Fog the mind. Make the target compliant. I had studied these methods in military resistance training at Camp Lejeune in 1967, had practiced resisting them in mock POW exercises that lasted 72 hours without food or sleep. Vincent thought he was breaking down an old preacher. He was actually testing a Marine who had been trained specifically to endure exactly this. Faith set the tray on my nightstand without looking at me. Her hands trembled slightly. She moved toward the door quickly, like she was afraid to stay. "Faith, sweetheart." I let my voice sound weak, confused. She flinched but stopped. "Is it Sunday?" "I have a sermon to prepare. The congregation is expecting me." Her shoulders curved inward. "It's Tuesday, Daddy. Just rest." She left. The lock clicked. I listened to her footsteps descend. 14 stairs. Then silence. I took 2 bites of the toast, enough to keep my blood sugar functional. Hid the rest in my pillowcase for later. Survival rationing. Another old skill that never truly left. The day passed slowly. No lunch. No visitors. Just the sounds of the house below me. Vincent on the phone. Muffled. Indistinct. Faith. Moving through the kitchen. The television playing something I couldn't identify. Normal domestic sounds that now felt like the soundtrack to a siege. At 3 in the afternoon, I retrieved the Nokia from the Bible and texted CJ. Locked in bedroom. Day 1. Minimal food. Proceeding as planned. Tell Grace I'm fine. His response came in 40 seconds. She's worried, but trusts you. Santos confirmed unit position 2 blocks away. Stay strong. I typed back. Tell her I love her. And tell her I'm winning. I wasn't sure about that last part. But Grace needed to believe it. And maybe if she believed it hard enough, it would become true. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing push-ups against the wall. Slowly, quietly. 10 sets of 10. Keeping my muscles from atrophying. Keeping my blood moving. Keeping my mind sharp. Between sets I read my Bible. The real pages, not the hollowed section. Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I had always preached those words to others. Now I was living them. Night fell. No dinner. The house went quiet below. I pressed my ear to the door and heard nothing. Then, at 11:43, footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, slow, deliberate. They stopped outside my door. The handle turned. Testing. Held for 5 seconds. Then released, breathing on the other side. Close to the wood. I could smell bourbon seeping through the gap beneath the door. Vincent had been drinking. Heavily, I stood motionless in the dark. One hand on the wall, the other within reaching distance of the oak cross. If that door opened tonight, I would be ready. But it didn't open. The footsteps retreated. Unsteady now. Down the hall to the guest room. I exhaled. Slow. Controlled. Reached under my pillow for the Nokia and texted CJ. Day 1 complete. He's drinking. Testing boundaries. Tomorrow he'll push harder. I'll be ready. I lay back down and stared at the ceiling. Through the wall I could hear Vincent pacing in the guest room. Back and forth. Back and forth. A caged animal measuring his cage. Running out of time. Good. Let him pace. Let the bourbon loosen his tongue. Let the pressure of Rousseau's deadline crack that polished exterior. Because somewhere underneath that charm was a confession waiting to spill out. And when it did, my little microphone in the floorboard would catch every syllable. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. To conserve energy for whatever tomorrow would bring. The valley of the shadow of death was dark tonight. But I had walked darker valleys before, and I had never walked them alone. Day 2. No breakfast until nearly 10. Faith brought a stale biscuit and half a glass of water. Set it down without a word. The lock clicked, like a period at the end of a sentence. I ate in small bites. Slow. Deliberate. Rationing the way we rationed sea rations in the bush when resupply was 3 days late and the enemy stood between us and the landing zone. My stomach protested. 73 years old. And the body doesn't forgive deprivation the way it did at 22. Joints aching deeper. A hollow feeling behind my ribs. But I had been hungry before. Cold before. Scared before. None of it killed me then. I did my wall push-ups. Quieter today. Conserving energy while keeping blood moving. Between sets, I sat on the bed and let my mind drift back. Not to the funeral. Not to the lies. Further back. To the boy, Elijah at 10 years old. Skinny arms and knobby knees. I had taken him to the garage and hung a heavy bag from the ceiling beam. Why do I need to learn to fight, Dad? You always say turn the other cheek. Turning the other cheek is a choice, son. Not a default. I wrapped his small hands in tape. You turn the other cheek when you're strong enough to fight, but choose mercy instead. That's courage. Running because you're scared is something else. He nodded with that serious expression he wore like other children wore baseball caps. Hit the bag, found a rhythm, and between punches said something I never forgot. I'm going to fight for people who can't fight for themselves, Dad. He kept that promise. Right up until it killed him. I pressed my palms against my eyes. Not crying. Marines don't cry during operations. But the weight of it. 2 years believing my son was weak. That stress broke him. And all along he was the bravest person in our family, standing up to a killer with nothing but a journal and his integrity. I'm going to make this right, son. Lunch never came. The afternoon stretched empty. I listened through the vent. Vincent on the phone twice. Tense voice. Couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear. Pressure building. At 4 I texted CJ. Day 2. No lunch. Weaker. Physically. Mentally sharp. Vincent's calls increasing. CJ responded. Grace says eat whatever they give. You need strength. Santos reports. Vincent left house at 2, returned 3:15. Met someone at a bar on Broadway. Investigating. I typed back. Tell Grace I love her. Thinking about Elijah learning to punch at 10 years old. Her reply through CJ. I remember. He split his lip on the heavy bag and refused to cry. Our brave boy. Hold on, Harry. Night fell. No dinner. I ate hidden toast from yesterday. Stale and hard, but it was calories. I chewed slowly and thought about Vincent meeting someone at a bar. Russo's people, maybe. The pressure compounding. At 10:30 the house went dark. Then, footsteps. Heavier than last night. Less coordinated. Vincent had been drinking more. Much more. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I was already positioned against the wall beside the closet. Oak cross in my right hand. Nokia in pocket. Breathing through the door. Ragged. The smell of bourbon stronger tonight. Not a drink or two. The kind of drinking that came from desperation. The kind that loosened tongues. Then his voice. Not shouting, not whispering. That dangerous middle ground where a man talks to whoever he imagines, listens in the dark. Righteous. Vincent laughed bitterly. Everybody in this family so damn righteous. The preacher with his sermons. Grace with her counseling. And Elijah. He spat the name. Saint Elijah. Golden boy. Couldn't just mind his own business. I held my breath. The microphone under the floorboard was 12 feet away, but Vincent was loud enough. He came to me like some avenging angel. His palm slapped the door. Sat in my office. Told me I had 1 week. 1 week. Or he'd go to the police. Destroy everything I built. A pause. The sound of liquid. Another swallow. Tony doesn't forgive debts. Tony doesn't care about righteous men or prayer meetings. Tony cares about money. And Elijah was going to take away my only way to pay. His voice cracked. I did what I had to do. Anyone would have done the same. Pacing now, back and forth outside my door. And Grace. Smart old woman. Too smart. Poking around. Asking questions. He kicked the baseboard. The vibration traveled through the wall. Had to handle her too. You understand that, don't you, old man? Sometimes the righteous ones have to go so the rest of us can survive. Retreating steps. Unsteady. A door closing down the hall. I stood motionless for a full minute. Processing. The device had caught every word. Partial confession. He admitted confronting Elijah. Admitted motive. Admitted handling Grace. But he hadn't said the specific words. Hadn't said killed or poison or sodium azide. Nothing explicit enough for a murder charge. Close. So close. But not enough. I texted CJ. Partial confession recorded. Motive and confrontation admitted. Said he had to handle Elijah and Grace. No specifics on method. Not enough for murder yet. CJ's reply. Santos says partial is good but needs explicit admission. Keep pushing. I typed back. He's drinking more each night. Russo pressure breaking him. One more push tomorrow. I'll provoke him. I leaned against the headboard. Shoulder aching. Stomach hollow. Knees throbbing from cold. But underneath the fatigue, something burned. Not rage anymore. Something purer. The same fire that made Elijah confront Vincent alone. The same fire that made Grace fake her death for truth. Mitchell fire. It ran in the blood. Tomorrow I would push Vincent to the edge. Use 40 years of counseling skill to find the crack in his armor and drive a wedge until everything spilled. Tomorrow he would tell me everything. Through the wall I heard him pacing still. Faster now. Bourbon fueling something darker. Good. Let it build. Let fear and alcohol and Russo's deadline converge into a perfect storm. Because storms made men confess things they swore they'd carry to the grave. And I was very good at listening. Day 3. Morning light filtered gray through my bedroom window. November in Nashville. The sky. The color of old pewter. I had slept 2 hours at most. Not from fear. From preparation. Running scenarios in my mind the way I used to run tactical simulations before a mission. If Vincent comes with a gun. If Vincent comes with more poison. If Vincent doesn't come at all and just lets me wither. Faith brought lunch at noon. Same routine. Tray. Stale bread. Water. But this time something was different. Her hands weren't just trembling. They were shaking so hard the water sloshed over the rim of the cup, leaving a trail of drops across the floor like breadcrumbs marking a path she was afraid to follow. And for the first time in 3 days, she looked at me, not the quick glance and away. Not the eyes fixed on the floor. She looked directly into my face. And what I saw there broke through every layer of tactical thinking and military discipline I had wrapped around my heart. My daughter was terrified. Not of me. Of everything else. I said nothing. Set the tray aside. Waited. 40 years of counseling had taught me that silence was often the most powerful question you could ask. People filled silence with truth when words only gave them room to construct lies. Faith stood in the middle of my bedroom. The tray was down. She had no reason to stay, but she didn't move toward the door. Her lower lip trembled. Her eyes filled. And then she collapsed onto the edge of my bed like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The sobs came hard and violent. Her whole body shaking with the force of them. 2 years of held breath releasing all at once. I waited. Let her cry. Didn't touch her. Didn't comfort her. Not yet. Because I needed to know which direction this would go. Whether she was crying from guilt or from captivity. Whether the tears were for herself or for someone else. I'm sorry, Daddy. That word. Daddy. She hadn't called me that since she was 12 years old and fell off her bicycle and split her knee open on the driveway. Before Vincent. Before everything changed. For what, sweetheart? For all of it. She lifted her face. Red-rimmed eyes. Skin blotchy. No makeup today. She looked younger, without it. Vulnerable. Like the girl I raised before some predator convinced her that obedience was the same as love. "Tell me," I said softly, still playing confused, still wearing the mask. But underneath it, every cell in my body was alert. Elijah came to our apartment 2 weeks before he died. Her voice cracked on her brother's name. Late, after midnight, Vincent was out. Elijah looked scared. Daddy. He never looked scared. Not once in his whole life. But that night his hands were shaking and he kept looking over his shoulder. I kept my face neutral. Concerned grandfather. Nothing more. He said Vincent was in serious trouble. Said he was involved with dangerous people. Said I needed to be careful. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He grabbed my shoulders and looked me in the eyes and said, "If anything happens to me, Faith, remember I tried to do the right thing and get away from Vincent. Promise me." "What did you do?" "Nothing." The word came out like a confession of its own. I thought they were having a work disagreement. Brother-in-law stuff. I told Elijah he was overreacting, told him to go home and sleep. Her face crumpled again. 3 days later, he was dead. The silence stretched between us, heavy as a casket. After the funeral, I found something. Faith pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. A text on Vincent's phone. He left it on the kitchen counter, and it lit up. From a contact saved as TR. She showed me the screen. Old message. Still there. Problem handled. Brother-in-law won't be asking questions anymore. Make sure the old man buys the stroke story. Cold spread through my chest, radiating outward. My hands curled into fists on my knees, but I kept my voice gentle. Pastoral. Safe. Did you confront him? I tried. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He grabbed me by the throat, slammed me against the bedroom wall, told me if I ever mentioned it to anyone, he'd tell the police I helped him steal the money. That I knew about everything. That I'd go to prison and lose you and lose Mom and never see daylight again. She pulled up her sleeve. Faded bruises on her forearm. Yellow-green. Old. But not old enough. He said God designed marriage as a hierarchy. That wives submit to husbands. That questioning him was the same as questioning God's order. Her voice went flat. Rehearsed, almost. Like she was reciting something she had been forced to memorize. He made me believe that silence was godliness. That obedience was faith. I felt something shift in my chest. Not the cold rage I had carried for Vincent. Something different. Grief of a different kind. My daughter had been imprisoned long before Vincent locked my door. Her cage was just invisible. He hits you, I said quietly. Not a question. When I ask questions he doesn't like. When I look at his phone. When I don't move fast enough. She pulled her sleeve back down. He's getting worse, Daddy. The drinking. The anger. And now with you locked in here and Mom gone, I can see it. Whatever he's planning, it's not going to end with paperwork. She grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. I think he's going to hurt you. Really hurt you. And I don't think he plans to let you walk away from it. I looked at my daughter. 36 years old. The little girl who used to sit on my lap during Sunday sermons. Who sang hymns off-key. And laughed when I pretended not to notice. Vincent had taken that girl and buried her under layers of fear and twisted scripture and violence. But she was still in there. I could see her now. Fighting her way to the surface. Faith. I held her hand in both of mine. It's not too late. How? She laughed. But it was the laugh of someone drowning. He'll destroy me. He destroyed Elijah. He destroyed Mom. You're next. Not if we stop him together. She stared at me. Hope and terror fighting across her face like weather fronts colliding. You believe me? She whispered. I believe you, baby. I've always believed in you. Angela. Vincent's voice from downstairs. Sharp. Commanding. Faith jumped like she'd been electrocuted. Wiped her tears. Backed toward the door. Faith. I caught her hand one last time. When you're ready to be free, I'll help you. But you have to choose. She squeezed my fingers once. Hard. Then she was gone. The lock clicked. Her footsteps descended. 14 stairs. I sat in the silence she left behind and processed everything. My daughter had known for 2 years, had seen proof, had been beaten into silence. Fear kept her trapped in the same house as her brother's killer. Could I save her? Could she save herself? I pulled the Nokia from the Bible and texted CJ. Faith is breaking. She knows about Elijah. She's scared but might help us. Don't give up on her. Grace's reply came through within a minute. Our daughter? Yes. She's still in there. Under the fear and abuse. Grace's response. I never stopped believing that. Mitchell women are strong. We just forget sometimes. Tell her when the time comes. Tell her I love her. I set the phone down. Through the floor I heard Vincent's voice. Harsh, barking orders. Faith's murmured responses. Compliant. Small, but she had squeezed my hand. She had said she believed me. And something had broken open behind her eyes that couldn't be sealed shut again. Tomorrow I would give her a way out. And pray she was brave enough to take it. She came back at 4 that afternoon. Vincent had left the house. I heard the Lexus pull out of the driveway 20 minutes earlier, tires crunching on gravel, engine fading into the distance. Faith must have been watching from the window, counting the seconds until his car disappeared around the corner. The lock clicked. She slipped in and closed the door behind her, leaned against it like she was barricading herself inside rather than locking me in. Her eyes were still red, but the tears had dried. Something harder had taken their place. Determination. Maybe. Or the desperate courage of someone who had finally decided that the risk of action was less terrifying than the certainty of inaction. He's gone to meet someone downtown, she whispered. He'll be at least an hour. Good. I sat up on the bed and dropped the confused old man act. Let my posture straighten. Let my eyes sharpen. Let her see the real me for the first time in 3 days. We don't have much time, so listen carefully. Faith blinked. Stared at me. I watched realization spread across her face like dawn breaking. Her mouth opened slightly. Daddy, you're not. You've been playing a role. Yes. I kept my voice low but firm. Everything I've done since I came back to this house has been part of a plan to stop Vincent, to get justice for Elijah, and to get you free. A plan. She pressed her hand against her mouth. Who else knows? People who love us. People Vincent can't touch. I didn't give her names. Not yet. Not until I was sure. But I need your help, Faith. You're the only one who can get close enough to find what we need. What do you need? First, Vincent keeps a briefcase. Black leather. Combination lock. He takes it everywhere. It's in the guest room closet right now. He left it when he went out. Can you open it? I know the combination. A ghost of bitter smile. He made me memorize it in case he ever needed me to fetch documents for him. 6/2/4, his mother's birthday. Good. Open it. Look for a list of names with dollar amounts beside them, probably handwritten. Also look for anything referencing someone named Russo. A payment schedule. Dates and amounts. Faith nodded. Quick. Focused. The fog of 2 years lifting from her eyes in real time. Second. I pulled the Nokia from the Bible. Showed her the screen. There's a detective named Maria Santos, Nashville Metro homicide. She investigated Elijah's death, and she never believed the official story. I read off the number CJ had given me. After you check the briefcase, I need you to contact her. Not from your phone. Vincent might check it. Use a payphone or buy a prepaid at the gas station. What do I tell her? Tell her who you are. Tell her what you told me today. The text message. The abuse. Elijah's warning. I held her gaze. And tell her you're willing to cooperate fully. Cooperate meaning what exactly? Meaning when the time comes, in the next day or two, you'll wear a wire, a recording device, hidden on you. So that when Vincent says what he's going to say, it's captured. Every word. Admissible in court. Fear flickered across her face. Real fear. The kind that came from imagining Vincent's hands on her throat again. But underneath it, something else rose. Anger. The slow-burning anger of a woman who had been caged too long. If he finds out, he won't. Not until it's too late for him to do anything about it. I took her hand. Faith, I won't lie to you. This is dangerous. If Vincent suspects anything, he's capable of violence. You know that better than anyone. I know. Her voice was small, but steady. But I'm already living with violence every day. At least, this way it ends. It ends, I confirmed. One way or another, within the next 48 hours, this ends. She squeezed my hand the same way she had that morning. Then she stood, smoothed her hair, straightened her blouse, became the obedient wife again. The mask settling into place with the practiced ease of someone who had worn it for years. 1 hour, she said. I'll be back. She left. I sat in the gathering dusk and waited. Praying. Actually praying this time. Not the performative prayers of a pulpit. The real kind. The desperate kind. The kind that comes when you've asked your daughter to walk into the lion's mouth, and all you can do is trust that God's hand is steadier than yours. 53 minutes later, the lock clicked again. Faith slipped back in. Her face was flushed, hands trembling, but eyes burning bright. I found it. She held up her phone. Photos. A handwritten ledger. 47 names. Dollar amounts ranging from $20,000 to $90,000 beside each one. Total at the bottom, circled twice. 1.8 million. She swiped to the next photo. A payment schedule. Dates going back 18 months. Amounts sent to someone listed only as T.R. And a note in Vincent's handwriting. Russo balance remaining. $400K deadline November 15th. November 15th was 2 days from now. There's more. She swiped again. A transfer authorization. From your account, Daddy. Your name. Your retirement fund. $180,000 moved in 12 installments over the past year. Her voice shook. Your signature is on it. But it's not your signature. I've seen your handwriting my whole life. That's a forgery. I know, baby. My voice came out rougher than I intended. I know. I called Santos. Faith pocketed her phone. From a payphone at the Shell station on Gallatin Road. She remembers Elijah's case. She said she always felt something was wrong. Faith took a breath. She wants to meet me tomorrow morning. Somewhere safe. She'll bring the wire equipment. And you agreed? I agreed. Faith's chin lifted. That Mitchell jaw. The same set I saw in Elijah. In Grace. In the mirror. Every morning. I'm done being afraid, Daddy. I'm done letting him win. I stood up. Crossed to her. Put my hands on her shoulders the way I used to, when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. I'm proud of you, Faith. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. Don't be proud yet. Be proud when it's over. Deal. She left for the last time that night. I listened to her footsteps descend. Heard Vincent's car pull into the driveway 10 minutes later. Heard their muffled voices downstairs. Normal. Routine. The performance continuing for one more night. I texted CJ. Faith is with us. Found evidence in briefcase. Photos secured. Meeting Santos tomorrow for wire. Tell Grace. Our daughter came home. Grace's response came through in seconds. I never doubted her. Mitchell women are strong. We just forget sometimes. Tell her I love her when you can. I typed one final message. We're close, Grace. 2 more days. Then Sunday comes. I set the Nokia down and leaned back against the headboard. 2 days until Russo's deadline. 2 days until Vincent's desperation reached critical mass. 2 days until Faith would stand close enough to a killer to record his confession. 2 days until Sunday. And on Sunday, the dead would rise. The phone woke me. Not mine. Vincent's. Ringing somewhere on the other side of my bedroom wall at 6:14 in the morning. I was already awake. Had been since 5. Lying still. Conserving. Listening. Vincent answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was thick with sleep. And last night's bourbon. Yeah. What? I pressed my ear against the wall. The old plaster was thin enough that I could hear most of what followed. Not the caller's words. But Vincent's responses told me everything. Tony, I told you. Friday. I'll have it by Friday. Silence. Then Vincent's voice changed. Higher. Tighter. The sound of a man watching his lifeline fray. That's not. You can't move the deadline. We agreed. On the 15th. More silence. Longer this time. I imagined Tony Russo's voice. On the other end. Low. Patient. The kind of patience that came from knowing you held all the power and could afford to wait for the other person to realize it too. 48 hours? Vincent's voice cracked. Tony, please. I need. At least until. Whatever Russo said cut him off mid-sentence. I heard Vincent's breathing change. Rapid. Shallow. Panic. I understand. 48 hours. Yes. I'll have it. I swear to God, I'll have every cent. A longer pause. Then Vincent spoke again, barely above a whisper. Please, don't involve Faith. She has nothing to do with this. I'll get the money. The old man has it. He just needs to sign. The call ended. Silence. Then a sound that made me smile in the darkness. Vincent's fist hitting the wall. Hard. Once. Twice. A strangled curse. The creak of bed springs as he sat down heavily. Then another sound. Glass on wood. The clink of a bottle being opened. 6:20 in the morning. And he was already pouring. Good. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. 48 hours. Russo had moved the deadline up. November 15th was no longer the finish line. Vincent now had until Thursday evening. 2 days of compressed panic. 2 days of bourbon-fueled desperation. 2 days before whatever consequences Russo had promised came knocking. The pressure was perfect. A man with nothing to lose and everything to fear would make mistakes. Would say things he shouldn't. Would do things he couldn't take back. I texted CJ from the Nokia. Russo called. Deadline moved up. Vincent has 48 hours. Pressure at maximum. He'll make his move soon. CJ responded within a minute. Santos briefed and ready. Faith meeting her at 9 at the Waffle House on Dickerson Pike. Wire fitting takes 30 minutes. She'll be back before Vincent notices. Tell Faith to be careful. If Vincent checks her phone or asks where she went, Santos is handling it. Prepaid phone for Faith. Cover story prepared. She's telling Vincent she's going to the pharmacy for his migraine medicine. Smart. Simple. Believable. I breathed a little easier. At 8:30 I heard the front door open and close. Faith's car starting. Pulling away. Going to meet the detective who would give her the tools to bring down her own husband. I wondered what that felt like. The weight of it. The betrayal in reverse. Choosing justice over the man she had sworn before God to love and honor. But then, Vincent had broken every vow first. Had shattered till death do us part by deciding that death would come early for everyone except himself. Vincent didn't bring breakfast, didn't come to my door at all that morning. I heard him downstairs, pacing, the floor creaking beneath his weight, in that restless pattern I had come to recognize, back and forth, back and forth. Phone calls every 20 minutes. Short, tense. I caught fragments through the heating vent. I need more time. The signatures aren't ready. Tell him I'm working on it. By Thursday. I swear. He was calling in every favor, every connection, trying to find another way. But Russo didn't deal in favors. Russo dealt in consequences. At 10:45, Faith's car returned. I heard the door open, Vincent's voice immediately. Sharp. Suspicious. Where were you? Pharmacy. Faith's voice was steady. Rehearsed but natural. Your migraine prescription was ready. And I picked up Daddy's blood pressure pills while I was there. A pause. I held my breath. Fine. Vincent's voice relaxed. Slightly. Did anyone see you? Talk to you? The pharmacist. That's it. Vincent. What's wrong? You seem... Nothing's wrong. Just handle your father. Make sure he eats something today. I need him coherent. Coherent. Not healthy. Not comfortable. Coherent. Functional enough to sign documents. Nothing more. Faith brought lunch at noon. A sandwich this time. Real food. Turkey and cheese on wheat bread. A glass of milk. I looked up at her as she set the tray down. She gave me the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. A signal. The wire was in place. Thank you, sweetheart, I said. Confused old man voice. Is it Sunday yet? I need to prepare my sermon. Not yet, Daddy. She smoothed my blanket. Her hand brushed mine. I felt something small and hard pressed into my palm. She closed my fingers around it. Soon, she left. I opened my hand. A folded slip of paper. I unfolded it carefully. Faith's handwriting. Small. Precise. Wire active. Santos listening 24/7. Team ready on your signal. I love you, Daddy. Let's end this. I read it twice. Then ate the paper. Old habit from training. Leave no evidence. The afternoon passed in tense silence. Vincent's pacing continued below. His phone rang 4 more times, each conversation shorter and more desperate than the last. At 3 o'clock, I heard something new. A voice that wasn't Vincent's, coming from the front porch. Deep, unfamiliar, threatening. Mr. Keller. Mr. Russo sends his regards. A reminder that Thursday evening is not flexible. Vincent's response was barely audible. I know. Tell him I know. He also asked me to mention that the next visit won't be a reminder. It'll be a collection. The front door closed. Vincent's footsteps retreated to the kitchen. The sound of a bottle opening. More bourbon. At 3 in the afternoon, I texted CJ. Russo sent someone to the house. Physical intimidation. Vincent cracking fast, drinking heavily. Tomorrow, he'll be desperate enough for anything. CJ's reply. Perfect. Santos has Faith's wire feed. Clear audio. Everything recorded from here on. Be ready for his move. It's coming. I knew it was. I could feel it the way you feel a thunderstorm building on a summer afternoon. The air pressure changing. The stillness before the first crack of lightning. Vincent was cornered. Out of time. Out of options. Out of charm. Tomorrow he would come to me with either a pen or a gun. Probably both. I lay back and closed my eyes. 48 hours had become 24. By this time tomorrow, Vincent would either have my signature on a power of attorney or he would have exhausted every civilized option and moved to uncivilized ones. Either way, I would be ready. The wire was live. Santos was listening. Faith was on our side. And somewhere in CJ's office, Grace was waiting for the moment she could walk back into the world and face the man who tried to kill her. 24 hours. One more night of bourbon and panic. One more sunrise. Then Sunday would come early, and God help the wolf when the shepherd finally bared his teeth. Morning came with the smell of eggs frying. Real eggs. Bacon too. Coffee. The aromas drifted up through the heating vent and into my bedroom, like an invitation. After 4 days of stale bread and water, the smell alone was almost enough to make me weep. Almost. But not quite. Because something about it was wrong. Faith unlocked my door at 7:30. She carried a tray with more food than I had seen in days. Scrambled eggs, golden and fluffy. 2 strips of bacon. Buttered toast. A tall glass of orange juice. And coffee. Black. The way I always took it. Her face was white as chalk. She set the tray on my nightstand with hands that trembled so violently the juice sloshed against the rim. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Not the way she had yesterday when she slipped me the note. This was different. This was the look of someone being forced to carry a weapon they didn't want to use. "Special breakfast," she said. Her voice flat. Mechanical. Reciting lines someone else had written. Vincent insisted. He says, "You need your strength today for the meeting with the lawyers." There was no meeting with lawyers. We both knew that. "That's real kind," I mumbled. Confused old man. Grateful grandfather. "Smells wonderful, sweetheart." She turned to leave. Stopped at the door. Her back to me. I watched her shoulders rise and fall with one controlled breath. Then she was gone. Lock. Clicking. I looked at the tray. Every instinct from 40 years of military service screamed at me. In hostile territory, you never eat what the enemy prepares unless you've watched every step of its preparation. Never. It was one of the first things they taught us at Camp Lejeune. Poison is the coward's weapon. Silent. Deniable. No blood on the killer's hands. I leaned close to the eggs without touching them. There. A faint, iridescent sheen on the surface. Like oil on water. Barely visible unless you were looking for it. The toast was darker on one side, as if something had been brushed on after toasting. And the orange juice. I tilted the glass slightly. Sediment, at the bottom. Fine. Almost invisible. But there, my heart rate stayed steady. Calm. Clinical. This was a reconnaissance problem now. Gather evidence. Document. Preserve. I picked up the fork and pushed the eggs around the plate. Made scraping sounds. Clinked the fork against the glass. Performance. Anyone listening from downstairs would hear an old man eating breakfast. Then I moved fast. Took a piece of toast and wrapped it tightly in tissue paper. Slid it under my mattress. Scooped a portion of eggs into another tissue and tucked it into my pillowcase behind the hidden bread from earlier. Evidence. If I survived long enough to hand it over, the orange juice I needed to dispose of carefully. Pouring it down the bathroom sink would leave traces. Throwing it out the window would be too obvious on the ground below. Then I saw it. On my windowsill. The small clay pot with Grace's magnolia cutting. She had started it from a branch of the mother tree in our backyard 3 years ago. Brought it to my bedroom when it outgrew her kitchen windowsill. A fragile thing, barely 12 inches tall. But alive. Green leaves reaching toward the light. "I'm sorry, Grace." I poured the orange juice slowly into the soil around the magnolia cutting. Watched the liquid absorb into the dark earth. Then I emptied the coffee into the same pot for good measure. Whatever was in those drinks would show its effects on the plant long before it could be denied. I set the empty glass and cup back on the tray. Arranged everything to look consumed. Then I made retching sounds. Loud. Convincing. Stumbled toward the bathroom door and gagged over the toilet. "Faith!" I called out weakly. "I don't feel well." My stomach. Footsteps on the stairs. Fast. The lock opening. Faith appeared in the doorway. Daddy? What's wrong? Think I ate too fast. I clutched my stomach, let my knees wobble. Not used to real food after. From downstairs. Vincent's voice. Sharp. Demanding. Did he eat it? Faith looked at me. At the tray. At the empty plates and glasses. Her eyes flickered with understanding, with relief, with something that looked like gratitude. He ate it, she called back. But he's sick now. Throwing up. Jesus Christ. Vincent's curse carried up the stairwell. Frustration. Not concern. Useless. Faith lingered for a moment. Mouthed 2 words at me without sound. Thank God. Then she backed out and locked the door. I sat on the bed and waited. Checked the Nokia. Texted CJ. Attempted poisoning via breakfast. Did not consume. Evidence preserved under mattress and pillowcase. Poured liquids into plant on windowsill. Will photograph results. CJ's response was immediate. Grace is shaking. She says same method he used on her. Sodium azide, in liquid form. Would have looked like heart failure within hours. Photograph. Everything. I typed back. Tell her I'm fine. Tell her he failed. Just like he failed with her. The hours crawled. I watched the magnolia cutting the way a soldier watches the tree line. Waiting for movement. Waiting for confirmation of what I already knew. By noon, the first leaf had turned brown at the edges, curling inward like a fist closing. By 2 o'clock, 3 more leaves had yellowed and drooped. The stem had darkened near the soil line. By 4, the cutting was dead. Every leaf brown and wilted. The stem black and soft. 12 hours earlier, it had been alive and reaching for light. Now it was poison evidence sitting in a clay pot on my windowsill. I photographed it with the Nokia. Multiple angles. Close-ups of the dead leaves. The darkened soil. The empty glass beside it for context. Sent everything to CJ. His reply. Photos received. Santos confirms, this is enough for attempted murder charge. Combined with everything else, Vincent is finished. Grace's message came through next. That was my magnolia. The one I started from our tree. He killed it the same way he killed our son. A pause. Then, tomorrow, Harry. Tomorrow, we end this. Sunday's coming. I looked at the dead plant on my windowsill. Such a small thing. A cutting barely a foot tall. But it had given its life to prove what Vincent was. A poisoner. A coward. A man who killed with invisible weapons and blamed God's timing for the results. Not anymore. I texted one final message. Tell Santos to be ready. Tomorrow morning Vincent makes his last play. He's out of poison and out of patience. Whatever comes next will be direct, violent, fast. CJ's reply. Unit positioned. Wire active. Everyone ready. Be careful tonight, Harry. You're almost home. Almost home. I looked at the dead magnolia one last time, then at the window beyond it. The November sky was darkening. One more night. One more sunrise. Tomorrow was Thursday. Russo's deadline. Vincent's last day of freedom, though he didn't know it yet. And Sunday. Sunday was coming for him like a freight train in the dark. He came at 4 that afternoon. No knock. Just the lock clicking and the door swinging open. Vincent stood in the frame with his sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened. The polished son-in-law I had met 3 years ago at church was gone. In his place stood a man with bloodshot eyes and bourbon on his breath at 4 in the afternoon. A man whose hands wouldn't quite stay still. He pulled my desk chair to the side of my bed and sat down. Close. Too close. I could smell the alcohol, and beneath it, something else. Sweat. Fear. The kind of body chemistry that changed when a man knew his time was running out. Dad. His voice was different today. Softer. Cracking at the edges. I need to talk to you about something important. I blinked at him. Slow. confused. Let my mouth hang slightly open. Vincent? Is that you? I thought you were at work. I'm right here, Dad. He placed his hand on my knee. Warm, steady, the practiced touch of a con man who knew how to simulate sincerity. I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. About Elijah. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my face slack. Bewildered. A grandfather hearing his dead grandson's name, and not quite understanding why. Elijah, I repeated. Let the words sit on my tongue like something fragile. My boy. Is he coming for dinner? No, Dad. Vincent leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed like a penitent in confession. Elijah's gone. Remember? 2 years ago, the stroke. I nodded slowly. The doctor said stress. He worked too hard. I told him, slow down, son. But he never listened. That's what I need to talk to you about. Vincent's voice dropped. Intimate. Confessional. Like we were the only two people in the world, and he was about to share a sacred truth. It wasn't just stress, Dad. Elijah was in trouble. I let my eyebrows furrow. Confused concern. Trouble? Financial trouble. Vincent rubbed his face with both hands. The gesture looked rehearsed, but the exhaustion behind it was real. Elijah had a gambling problem, a serious one. He'd been betting on sports, cards, anything he could find. Got himself into debt with some very dangerous people in Memphis. Lies. Every word a carefully constructed lie. Blaming my dead son for Vincent's own sins. I felt rage rising in my chest like lava, but I pushed it down. Buried it beneath 50 years of discipline. Gambling? I shook my head. No. Elijah wouldn't. He was raised better. I know it's hard to hear. Vincent's hand found my knee again. Squeezed. He hid it from everyone. Even Grace. But when the debt got too big, he started taking money from the company. From your accounts. My accounts. The audacity of it. Sitting on my bed, in my house. After stealing my money and killing my son, and blaming Elijah for all of it. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat and squeeze until his lies stopped forever. But I sat still. Played the broken old man receiving terrible news. How much? I whispered. A lot, Dad. Almost 200,000. Vincent let his eyes well up. Impressive. Almost convincing if you didn't know what lived behind them. He took it from your retirement fund. Forged your signature on transfer documents. No. I let my voice crack. Genuine emotion leaking through the performance. My boy wouldn't steal from me. I tried to help him. Vincent pressed on. Building the narrative layer by layer. I confronted him about it. Offer to help him pay it back. Get into treatment for the addiction. He wiped his eyes. But the shame was too much. The stress of knowing he'd stolen from his own father. Combined with the pressure from these dangerous men in Memphis. You're saying he. I couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The implication hung between us like smoke. The stroke wasn't entirely natural, Dad. Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper now. Intimate. Devastating. The doctors said extreme stress can trigger cerebral hemorrhage in rare cases, and Elijah was under more stress than anyone knew. The gambling. The debt. The theft. Knowing he'd betrayed his family. He paused. I think the guilt killed him. Every word was poison. More toxic than whatever he had put in my breakfast. Because these words didn't just try to kill my body. They tried to kill my son's memory all over again. Why are you telling me this now? I kept my voice fragile. Wavering. Vincent's performance shifted. Here it came. The real reason he was sitting on my bed with manufactured tears and a pocket full of lies. Because I'm in danger, Dad. The tears vanished. Replaced by something rawer. Genuine fear. The men Elijah owed money to. In Memphis. They think I was involved because I tried to help him. They've been threatening me. Threatening Faith. Threatening? I let alarm creep into my voice. They want $400,000. By tomorrow night. Vincent grabbed my hand. His palm was damp. If I don't pay, they'll come after our family. After Faith. After you. Dear God. I pulled my hand away slowly. Let it tremble. What do we do? There's a way. Vincent stood, paced to the window and back. The movement of a man who had rehearsed this speech 100 times. Grace's trust fund, $3.2 million. If you sign a power of attorney giving me temporary access, I can pay off Elijah's debt and protect this family. You want me to. I trailed off. Let confusion and fear war across my face. Just temporarily, Dad. I'll pay back every cent. I'll set up a payment plan. You'll never lose a dollar. He crouched beside my bed. Eye level. Earnest. Desperate. Think of Faith. If these men come for her. I said nothing for a long time. Let the silence stretch. Let him sweat. I need to pray on it, I said finally. Overnight. The Lord will guide me. Something flickered behind his eyes. Impatience. Fury. Just for a flash. Then the mask slid back. Of course, Dad. Of course. He stood. Smoothed his shirt. Forced a smile. Tomorrow morning then. First thing. We'll talk again, and you can give me your answer. He moved toward the door. Then stopped. Turned back. And the mask slipped completely. For one single heartbeat. Tomorrow morning, Dad. His voice was flat. Cold. The real Vincent underneath all the performance. First thing. Because if we don't handle this tomorrow, there won't be any more mornings to pray about. His hand touched his jacket pocket. Briefly. Unconsciously. But I saw it. The outline of something hard and angular pressing against the fabric from inside. A gun. He left. The lock clicked. I sat perfectly still until his footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Then I reached for the Nokia. He came. Full cover story. Blamed Elijah for everything. Gambling. Theft. Says Russo is after him because he helped Elijah. Wants me to sign POA tomorrow morning. He has a gun in his jacket. Tomorrow is it. CJ's response came in 30 seconds. Santos has the wire feed. Got every word of his lies. She says, combined with tomorrow's confrontation, they'll have enough. Be ready at dawn. Grace's message. He blamed our son. Again. He sat in front of you and called Elijah a thief and a gambler. Again. A pause. Tomorrow, Harry. End it. I typed back one word. Sunday. Then I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow morning, Vincent would come through that door, expecting a confused old man with a pen in his hand. Instead, he would find a Marine with 50 years of interrogation instinct and nothing left to lose. The lies stopped tomorrow. One way or another. The house went quiet at 11. Vincent's footsteps retreated to the guest room. Faith's light clicked off shortly after. Outside my window, the November sky was starless. Overcast. The kind of darkness that swallowed everything and gave nothing back. I lay on my bed fully dressed. Shoes on. Belt tight. The oak cross within arm's reach against the headboard. Not because I planned to use it, but because a soldier never faces battle without a weapon nearby. Even one he prays he won't need. Sleep was not an option. Not tonight. My body was exhausted. 5 days of minimal food had hollowed me out. My joints ached with a deep, persistent throb that no amount of wall push-ups could fix. But my mind was a blade. Sharp. Clear. Turning over every variable the way I used to turn over terrain maps before a patrol. Variable 1. Vincent had a gun. Glock from the outline in his jacket. Maybe 9mm. Maybe .40 caliber. Either way, More than enough to kill a 73-year-old man at close range. Variable 2. Faith had a wire. Santos was listening in real time. Response team positioned 2 blocks away. 2-minute arrival once the signal was given. Variable 3. 2 minutes is a long time when someone is pointing a gun at your chest. I stared at the ceiling and let my mind travel backward. Not to yesterday. Not to last week. To 1969. To the last night, before my final engagement in the Mekong Delta. I had been 20 years old, lying in a foxhole with red mud soaking through my fatigues and the sound of artillery somewhere north of our position. The sky had looked exactly like tonight. Black. Empty. Waiting. Sergeant Morrison had crawled up beside me in the dark. Old man, by Marine standards. 34. A lifetime of wars behind his eyes. Scared, Mitchell? Yes, Sergeant. Good. Scared means you're paying attention. Dead men don't get scared. He spat tobacco juice into the mud. You know what separates the ones who make it home from the ones who don't? What? The ones who make it home have already decided they're going to. Before the first shot. Before the first move. They've already decided the outcome in their mind. Everything after that is just execution. I had made it home. Morrison hadn't. Took a round through the throat 2 hours later. Bled out in my arms while I pressed my hands against the wound and begged God for a miracle that never came. 54 years later, and I could still feel his blood on my fingers, still hear his last breath, still carry the weight of a man who taught me how to survive, but couldn't survive himself. I've already decided the outcome, Sergeant. Tomorrow, I walk out of this house alive, and Vincent Keller goes to prison. Through the wall, I heard movement. Vincent wasn't sleeping either. His footsteps paced the guest room. Shorter circuits now. Tighter. Like an animal whose cage was shrinking by the hour. I heard the muffled sound of his phone. A short conversation. Then silence. Then pacing again. At 1:30 in the morning, the Nokia vibrated against my chest. A message from CJ. Faith texted Santos from the bathroom. Wire charged and ready. She'll position herself in the upstairs hallway when Vincent goes to your room in the morning. Close enough to capture everything through the door. I typed back. Good. Tell Santos I need at least 5 minutes with him before they move in. I need him to say it. All of it. Explicitly. On tape. CJ's response. Santos understands. She'll hold the team until you give the signal, or until she hears immediate threat to life. Your call, Harry. My call. 5 minutes alone with a man holding a gun. 5 minutes to make a killer confess, while my daughter stood in a hallway with a wire, and my life hung on whether I could keep Vincent talking instead of shooting. The weight of it settled on my chest like a stone. I reached for my Bible. The real one on the nightstand. Not the hollowed Nokia hiding place, but the worn leather King James I had carried for 40 years. Opened it in the dark, to a page I knew by heart. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. My lips moved in the darkness, forming the words without sound. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I closed the book and held it against my chest. The leather was warm from my body heat, worn smooth from decades of hands. Grace's hands. Elijah's hands as a boy. Faith's hands when she was small enough to sit on my lap and trace the gold lettering with her finger. God. I'm not asking for a miracle tomorrow. I'm asking for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of clarity. 5 minutes of Vincent's pride working against him. 5 minutes before someone pulls a trigger. And God. If one of us has to die tomorrow morning, let it be me. Not Faith. Not again. Through the wall, Vincent's pacing had stopped. I heard the creak of bed springs. Then nothing. He was lying down, but I knew he wasn't sleeping. He was staring at his own ceiling, running his own calculations. How to get my signature. How to satisfy Rousseau. How to survive another day. We were both soldiers tonight. Both lying awake in our foxholes. Both knowing that dawn would bring the fight. The difference was, I knew what was coming. He only thought he did. At 4:17, the Nokia vibrated one final time. Grace's message through CJ. I love you, Harry. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that you gave our son justice. You gave our daughter a chance. And you gave me the courage to come back from the dead. I'll see you on the other side of this. One way or another. Your Grace. I read it 3 times. Pressed the phone against my heart. Then I watched the window. Waiting for dawn. The way I had waited for dawn. In a foxhole. 54 years ago. Knowing that when the light came, everything would change. Knowing that the man I had been before this week, the grieving pastor, the broken widower, the father who believed lies about his son, that man would not survive the morning. Good. Let him die. Something better was being born in his place. The first gray light appeared at 6:22. Thin. Cold. November dawn. The color of gunmetal. Sunday's light. I stood up. Straightened my shirt. Rolled my shoulders despite the stiffness. Took one breath. Then another. Ready. The sound of metal sliding on metal. A round being chambered. The most recognizable sound in the world if you've ever heard it before. And I had heard it 1,000 times. My eyes were already open. Had been since 6:22. The gray dawn light filled my bedroom like cold water filling a glass. And in the doorway stood Vincent Keller. No mask, no smile, no concerned son-in-law performance. Just a man with a Glock 9mm in his right hand and nothing left to lose. Get up, he said. Flat. Emotionless. The desperation from yesterday had burned away overnight, leaving something colder, more dangerous. The voice of a man who had made his decision and was simply executing it now. I rose slowly. Kept my hands visible. The oak cross was under my pillow, but might as well have been on the moon. No reaching for it. Not with that barrel pointed at my chest from 8 feet away. Living room. Now. He gestured with the gun. Casual. Like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. Maybe this was how he'd walked Elijah to his last cup of coffee. Calm. Collected. Business. I walked ahead of him down the stairs. 14 steps. Each one bringing me closer to whatever came next. My mind was cataloging everything. His position behind me. The distance to the front door. Whether Faith was awake. Whether she was in the hallway. The living room was dim. Curtains still drawn. Vincent pushed me toward the dining room chair, and I sat. The power of attorney papers were already on the table, a pen beside them. He had prepared this like a business meeting. Everything in order. Sign, he said. Dropped into the chair across from me. Gun resting on the table aimed at my midsection. Finger outside the trigger guard, but close. Very close. Vincent. I let my voice waver. Not entirely acting this time. There was a gun pointed at me after all. Please. Let's talk about this. We're done talking, Dad. He pushed the papers closer. You had all night to pray. Now sign. I picked up the pen. Held it over the signature line. Let my hand tremble. Then I set it down. Before I sign, I said quietly, I want the truth. You have the truth. I told you yesterday. Elijah's debts. The men in Memphis. No. I looked up, met his eyes, and for the first time in 5 days, I let the mask fall completely. Let him see me, the real me. Not the confused old preacher, not the grieving grandfather, the Marine, the soldier, the father who knew exactly what had been done to his son. I want the real truth. About Elijah. Something shifted in Vincent's face. A flicker. Recognition that something had changed. What are you talking about? I know about the 47 veterans, Vincent. My voice was steady now. No tremor, no confusion. I know about the shell companies. I know about Tony Russo in Memphis. I know about the $1.8 million you stole from old soldiers who trusted you because you sat in their churches and quoted their scripture. His face went white. The gun shifted slightly on the table. His fingers tightened around the grip. How do you? I know about my $180,000. I continued. Calm, methodical, laying out the evidence like a prosecutor, like Elijah would have. 12 transfers, over 14 months, forged signature on each one, using the temporary power of attorney Faith, signed when I had knee surgery. Who told you this? Vincent's voice had gone thin. Hi. The confidence evaporating like morning fog burned off by sun. Who the hell told you? Elijah told me. I let those words hang in the air. Watched them hit. My son kept a journal. Vincent. Everything documented. Every transaction. Every shell company. Every victim. Dated. Detailed. The way I taught him when he was 12 years old. Vincent stood abruptly. The chair scraped backward. The gun came up off the table, pointed at my face now. His hand was shaking. Not from cold. That journal doesn't exist. I searched his apartment. I searched everywhere. You didn't search well enough. I stayed seated. Stayed calm. Looking down the barrel of a gun the way I had looked down gun barrels in the Mekong Delta. Fear was there. But so was purpose. And purpose was stronger. Elijah was smarter than you gave him credit for. He hid it somewhere you'd never think to look. Where? The word came out strangled. Tell me the truth first. I leaned forward. Toward the gun. Not away from it. Tell me what really happened to my son. And I'll tell you where the journal is. Silence. The clock on the wall ticked. Once. Twice. 3 times. You're bluffing. But his voice said he wasn't sure. His eyes said he wasn't sure. The sweat on his upper lip said he wasn't sure about anything anymore. Am I? I kept my voice low. Even. 47 names, Vincent. Dollar amounts beside each one. Tommy Watkins. 47,000. Robert Henderson. 63,000. James Park. 28,000. Would you like me to continue? Because I can recite the entire list from memory. The names hit him like bullets. Each one a confirmation that I wasn't bluffing, that the journal was real, that everything he had done was documented and recorded and waiting. Fine. The word exploded out of him. Cracked and raw. Fine. You want truth? Your righteous son found my accounts. 8 weeks of playing detective. Came to my office like some avenging angel and told me I had 1 week to confess. And you killed him. I handled it. Vincent's face was red now. Veins standing out in his neck. The gun still pointed at me, but his hand was shaking worse. He was going to destroy everything. Go to the police. Go to you. Ruin my marriage. Send me to prison. I had no choice. You had every choice. He wouldn't listen to reason. The words poured out now. Unstoppable. Like a dam breaking. So I went to his apartment. Brought wine. His favorite Cabernet. We talked. I told him we could work it out together. And when he wasn't looking, I put enough sodium azide in his glass to stop his heart. There it was. The confession. Explicit. Detailed. Method. And motive. On Faith's wire. Captured. By Santos's team. But I needed more. And Grace? I asked softly. What did you do to my wife? Vincent laughed. A terrible sound. The laugh of a man who had stopped caring about consequences. Smart woman. Too smart. Found the journal 6 months ago. Started asking questions I couldn't answer. So I put the same thing in her afternoon tea. He shrugged. The gun lowered slightly, as his body language shifted from threatening to unburdened. Confessing felt good to him. I could see it. The relief of finally telling someone. Watched her collapse right there in your kitchen. Heart attack, the doctors said. Tragic. And what about Faith? I pressed. The final question. The one that would seal everything. What happens to my daughter when the money runs out? When Russo wants more? Vincent's eyes met mine. Cold. Empty. The mask was gone forever now. What remained underneath was something barely human. Whatever I have to do, he said, from the hallway. A sound. Small. Involuntary. A gasp. A choked sob. Vincent spun toward it. The gun sweeping away from me toward the archway that led to the stairs. Faith stood there. Pale as death. Eyes wide. One hand pressed against her mouth. The other clutching the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She had heard everything. Everything that happened next took less than 4 seconds. I know, because my training counted them. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4. On 1, Vincent's arms swung toward Faith. The Glock tracking from me to her in a smooth arc. His body turning, weight shifting to his left foot. Eyes locked on our daughter. On 2. I was out of the chair. Not thinking. 50 years of muscle memory taking over. The same reflexes that had saved my life in the Mekong Delta when thinking meant dying. My legs pushed. My body launched. 73 years old and 208 pounds of father moving between a gun and his child. On 3. My shoulder hit Vincent's ribcage. The impact drove us both sideways into the dining room table. Papers scattered. The pen flew. His arm jerked upward from the collision, and the gun discharged. The sound was enormous in the enclosed space. A thunderclap that erased everything else. The muzzle flash lit the dim room like lightning. I felt heat along my left shoulder. Then pain. Sharp. Burning. Like someone had pressed a hot iron against my skin and held it there. On 4, we hit the floor together. Vincent beneath me, his head cracking against the hardwood, the Glock spinning out of his grip and skittering across the floor toward the kitchen. Training took over completely. I drove my forearm across his throat. Not to kill, to control, pin, and contain. The way Sergeant Morrison taught us in hand-to-hand at Camp Lejeune. Your weight is your weapon, Mitchell. Use every pound of it. Vincent thrashed beneath me. Younger, stronger, but dazed from his head, hitting the floor, and drunk on last night's bourbon that hadn't fully left his system. His hands clawed at my arm, fingers scrabbling against my sleeve. Get off me, he gasped. Get off. I pressed harder. Felt his resistance weaken as oxygen thinned. Not enough to kill. Just enough to hold. Just enough to keep him pinned until help arrived. Blood ran down my left arm, warm and wet, soaking through my shirt. The bullet had caught the meat of my shoulder. Through and through from the feel of it. Painful but not fatal. Not if I kept pressure minimal and didn't move the arm too much. Faith. I kept my voice steady, despite the pain, despite the adrenaline, making my vision pulse at the edges. The gun. Kick it away from him. Then call 911. She moved. I heard her feet crossing the floor, the metallic scrape of the Glock being pushed further away. Then her voice. Shaking, but clear. Functional. 911. I need police and ambulance at 417 Riverside Drive. My father has been shot. The shooter is restrained. Please hurry. Vincent stopped thrashing. Went limp beneath me. Not unconscious. Just defeated. The fight draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. His eyes stared up at the ceiling. Blank. Empty. The eyes of a man who had just realized that everything was over. You can't prove anything, he whispered. Automatic. reflexive. The words of a con man even now reaching for one more lie. It's just your word. Against Vincent. Faith's voice cut through from above us. I looked up. She stood over us both, tears streaming down her face, but her hand was steady as she pulled aside her collar to reveal the small wire running from her neckline into her blouse. It's your word against your word. His face went slack. True horror. The kind that came from understanding, finally and completely, that every exit had been sealed, every lie recorded, every confession captured. You. His voice was barely air. You were wearing. Since yesterday. Faith's chin lifted. That Mitchell jaw. Detective Santos has been listening to everything. Every word you said about Elijah. About Mom. About what you'd do to me. Sirens. Distant but approaching fast. Growing louder by the second. Santos had heard the gunshot and mobilized without waiting for the code phrase. Vincent made one final attempt. Surged beneath me with desperate strength. I pressed down harder, ignoring the scream from my shoulder, and felt him collapse again. The fight was gone. Truly gone. The front door burst open. Not kicked. Unlocked from outside. Santos had a key. Of course she did. Faith must have given her one yesterday. Detective Maria Santos entered first. Weapon drawn. Badge on her belt. Behind her, 3 uniformed officers. Nashville Metro Police. Nobody move. The suspect is pinned, I managed. Weapon discharged. 1 round. I'm hit, but stable. Santos holstered her weapon and knelt beside us. Helped me roll off Vincent, while 2 officers took over. They flipped him, cuffed him, pulled him to his feet. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared at nothing. I sat on the floor, back against the dining room wall, left hand pressed against my right shoulder where blood still seeped through my shirt. The pain was real now, no longer masked by adrenaline, throbbing in time with my heartbeat. Faith was beside me in an instant, her hands pressing a kitchen towel against the wound, tears falling onto my shirt. Daddy. Oh God. Daddy. I'm all right, baby. I covered her hand with mine. It's just a shoulder. I've had worse. You haven't had worse. She laughed through her tears. You've never been shot. Well, I managed a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. There was this one time outside Da Nang, but that's a story for another day. Santos approached, crouched to my level. Her expression was professional, but I caught something underneath. Respect. Maybe admiration. Mr. Mitchell. We have everything. Full confession, recorded on Faith's wire and corroborated by our surveillance team. Chad Pierce, she caught herself. Vincent Keller won't see daylight again. The wire got it all? I needed to hear it confirmed. Every word. Sodium azide. Elijah's murder. Grace's attempted murder. His plans for Faith. Santos stood. Paramedics are 30 seconds out. Stay still. I leaned my head back against the wall, closed my eyes. The pain in my shoulder was a living thing now, pulsing, burning. But underneath it, something else. Something warm and vast and overwhelming. Relief. It was over. 5 days of captivity. 5 days of performance. 5 days of surviving on bread and water and sheer willpower. And it was finally, completely, over. Daddy. Faith's voice pulled me back. There's someone here. I opened my eyes, looked toward the front door, where morning light was flooding through the shattered frame. And there, silhouetted against the November dawn, stood a figure I would recognize in any light, in any world, in any lifetime. Grace. She walked through the broken doorway, calm, steady, her silver hair catching the sunrise, her eyes finding mine across the chaos of officers and sirens and scattered papers. She moved past Santos without stopping, past the officers dragging Vincent toward the door. Straight to me. She knelt beside Faith. Two women, mother and daughter, both crying now. Grace's hands found my face, cupped my cheeks, the way she had 10,000 times across 46 years. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." I corrected. Vincent saw her as the officers pulled him toward the patrol car. His legs buckled, his mouth opened, but no sound came. He stared at Grace, like she was a ghost risen from the grave, which, I supposed, she was. "Hello, Vincent," Grace said without turning around, her eyes still locked on mine. "Surprised to see me?" His scream echoed down Riverside Drive as they loaded him into the car. Raw. Animal. The sound of a man watching his last lie crumble to dust. Grace kissed my forehead. Gentle. Warm. Then she wrapped her arms around Faith and held our daughter while the paramedics cut my shirt away and dressed the wound. It was over. The wolf had been caught. The shepherd had survived. And Sunday had finally come. 2 hours later, I stood at the pulpit of Calvary Hill Baptist Church. My left arm hung in a sling. The bandage beneath my shirt was already spotted with fresh blood from movement I shouldn't have been making. The paramedic had told me to go to the hospital. I told him I had one more sermon to deliver first. He didn't understand. But Grace did. She had looked at me while they dressed the wound and said simply, "Go. Finish it. I'll be there when you need me." So here I stood, behind the same oak pulpit where I had preached for 32 years. Baptized babies, married couples, eulogized the dead, read scripture until the words wore grooves into my tongue. This was my place, my battlefield, and today's sermon would be unlike any I had ever delivered. The sanctuary was full, 200 faces looking up at me from polished wooden pews. The Sunday morning faithful, who had come expecting hymns and scripture and the comfortable rhythm of worship. They didn't know yet, didn't understand why their retired pastor was standing at the pulpit with his arm in a sling and blood on his collar. I gripped the pulpit edge with my good hand and looked out at them. Tommy Watkins in the third row, 76 years old, Vietnam veteran, one of 47, his wife beside him, holding his hand. I could see other faces I recognized from the list in Vincent's briefcase. Robert Henderson, James Park, Dorothy Coleman, old soldiers and their families. All of them robbed. All of them ashamed. All of them silent. Not anymore. Brothers and sisters. My voice filled the sanctuary the way it always had. Strong. Resonant. The voice God gave me for this exact purpose. Today, I don't bring a sermon. I don't bring scripture or hymns or comfortable words about grace and mercy. The congregation shifted. Uncertain. I saw Pastor Williams, my replacement, lean forward in the front row with concern on his face. Today I bring a confession. I let the word hang in the vaulted space. Not my confession, but one that has haunted this community for 2 years. One that has stolen from you, lied to you, murdered in your midst while wearing the mask of faith. Murmurs now. Glances exchanged. The uncomfortable rustle of people who sensed something was about to change and weren't sure they wanted it to. 2 years ago, my son Elijah Mitchell died. You were told it was a stroke. You were told he had been living a secret life of gambling and theft. You were told he was weak. That shame killed him. I paused. Let the silence build. Every word of that was a lie. I reached beneath the pulpit where CJ had placed the equipment an hour earlier. A small digital player connected to the church's sound system. I pressed play. Elijah's voice filled Calvary Hill. Clear. Steady. Alive. In a way that made my chest ache. My name is Elijah Mitchell. I'm an attorney with Mitchell and Associates in Nashville. I'm recording this because I've discovered a fraud operation targeting elderly veterans in the Tennessee area. The operation is run by Vincent Keller through a series of shell companies connected to Anthony Russo of Memphis. To date, I have confirmed 47 victims totaling $1.8 million in stolen retirement funds. Gasps. A woman in the back row pressed her hand to her mouth. Tommy Watkins sat up straighter. His wife gripped his arm. The victims are recruited through church events and VFW halls. They're approached by Vincent Keller, who presents himself as a financial consultant and devout church member. He offers veterans assistance loans with favorable terms. The loans are fraudulent. The money is taken and funneled through shell companies to organized crime operations in Memphis. Elijah's voice continued, naming names, citing amounts, documenting everything with the precision I had taught him. The congregation sat in stunned silence, some crying, some angry, some staring straight ahead as realization dawned that they too had been victims. When the recording ended, I looked out at the pews. My son made that recording 3 days before he was murdered. Vincent Keller poisoned Elijah to keep him silent. Then he destroyed my son's reputation to cover his own crimes. Tommy Watkins stood up. Slowly, his old knees creaking, his hands shaking, but his voice was clear. I lost $47,000. He looked around at the congregation. I was too ashamed to tell anyone. I thought I was a fool. I thought it was my fault. His voice cracked, but it wasn't. It was him. Another man stood. Robert Henderson. 2 rows back. 63,000. My wife's medical fund. Gone. Dorothy Coleman. Small. Frail. 81 years old. 28,000. All I had left from Gerald's pension. One by one they rose, like a wave building in slow motion. 47 veterans and their families, standing in the pews of Calvary Hill Baptist Church, bearing witness, breaking silence, reclaiming what had been stolen from them. Not just money, dignity, trust, faith in their own judgment. I counted them. 47 standing, 200 watching, the whole church holding its breath. Vincent Keller was arrested this morning, I said. He confessed to murdering my son, to attempting to murder my wife and me, to defrauding every person standing in these pews right now. Santos had positioned officers at both exits. 2 of Vincent's associates who regularly attended Calvary Hill sat in the congregation. I watched their faces go white as they realized what was happening. They stood to leave. Officers intercepted them before they reached the doors. Those men helped Vincent target you, I said, watching them being led out in handcuffs. They identified which of you had savings, which of you trusted easily, which of you would be too ashamed to report what happened. The congregation erupted. Anger, relief, tears, voices overlapping, questions, flying. Pastor Williams, trying to restore order. Then the back door of the sanctuary opened. Grace walked in. The sound that rose from 200 throats was unlike anything I had heard in 32 years of ministry. A collective gasp that became a cry, that became something almost like a hymn. Shock and joy and disbelief all woven together into one great exhalation of human emotion. Grace Mitchell, dead 3 weeks, buried in Nashville National Cemetery, standing in the aisle of Calvary Hill Baptist Church, in a simple blue dress with her silver hair pulled back and her chin held high. She walked up the center aisle, past the pews, past the standing veterans, past the weeping congregation, straight to me. I'm alive, she said. Not to me, to all of them. Her voice carrying without amplification, the voice of a woman who had counseled hundreds of people in crisis and knew how to fill a room with calm authority. Vincent tried to kill me the same way he killed Elijah, but I was ready. And with the help of good people, I survived. She turned to face the congregation. My son died trying to protect every one of you. Today, His father and I finished what Elijah started. Tommy Watkins raised his right hand to his brow. A salute. Crisp. Perfect. The way we learned it 50 years ago. Behind him, one by one, every veteran in the church did the same. I stood at the pulpit watching my wife address our congregation. Watching 47 old soldiers salute my family. Watching 200 people process the revelation that evil had lived among them disguised as faith, and that justice had come disguised as a dead woman walking. My shoulder throbbed, my eyes burned. But I looked up at the stained glass window above the altar. An angel with outstretched wings. Below it, the inscription I had read 10,000 times across 32 years. The truth shall set you free. For the first time since Elijah died, I believed those words completely. The morning after my sermon at Calvary Hill Baptist Church, I woke in a hospital bed at Vanderbilt University Medical Center with 17 stitches in my left shoulder and Grace's hand wrapped around mine. She was asleep in the visitor's chair, her silver hair falling across her face like it did 40 years ago, when I used to watch her nap on Sunday afternoons. I did not move. I did not breathe too deeply. I simply held her fingers and thanked God for every single second I had been given back. 3 days later, Detective Maria Santos visited my room with a manila folder and a cup of black coffee she set on my nightstand without asking. She told me Vincent Keller had been formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 47 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of money laundering, and conspiracy to commit racketeering. The district attorney was pursuing life without parole. Tony Russo had been arrested in Memphis by federal marshals on the same morning, caught trying to board a private charter to Cancun with $600,000 in a duffel bag. His network, Santos said, was finished. Every shell company had been frozen. Every forged signature had been cataloged. I asked about Faith. Santos closed the folder and sat on the edge of my bed, which surprised me. She said Faith had cooperated fully, testified before the grand jury, and accepted a plea agreement of 3 years supervised probation and mandatory counseling for victims of domestic coercion. The judge noted her bravery in wearing the wire and recommended trauma therapy rather than incarceration. I nodded. That was mercy and justice holding hands, which is the only way either one works. Faith visited me that afternoon. She stood in the doorway like a child waiting for permission to enter a room she had once been locked out of. I opened my good arm and she crossed the distance in 2 steps, pressing her face against my chest and sobbing so hard the nurse checked my heart monitor. I told her what I had told every broken soul who ever sat in my counseling chair. You are not what was done to you. You are what you choose to become after. She whispered that she was sorry about Elijah, sorry about Grace, sorry about everything she failed to see. I told her Elijah would have forgiven her before she finished the sentence. That was who he was. That was who she could still be. Grace and I returned to our home on Belmont Avenue 6 days after my discharge. The house smelled like paint because C.J. Johnson and Tommy Watkins had spent the week repairing every room Vincent had occupied. New locks, new floors in the hallway, fresh magnolias on the kitchen table, which made me smile for reasons only Grace understood. She took my hand and walked me through every room as if we were newlyweds touring our first apartment. In the living room, she pointed to the wall where Elijah's senior portrait hung beside his Marine Corps photograph. She said we would never take those down. I said we never would. Over the following months, I watched my family rebuild itself the way rivers rebuild banks after a flood. Slowly, with patience, with silt, and sunlight, and time. Faith moved into the guest bedroom for 8 weeks, attending therapy 3 times per week with Dr. Rachel Simmons, a trauma specialist Santos recommended. She learned words I never knew existed: coercive control, trauma bonding, psychological captivity. Each word gave her permission to stop blaming herself for the years she spent believing Vincent's lies. On the first anniversary of Vincent's arrest, Grace and I stood before the congregation at Calvary Hill and announced the creation of the Elijah Mitchell Foundation for Veteran Justice. Tommy Watkins served as board president. Dorothy Coleman managed outreach. Robert Henderson handled finances with the transparency of a man who understood what it meant to have money stolen by someone you trusted. Within 6 months, the foundation had recovered $412,000 for defrauded veterans across Tennessee, trained 31 churches in elder abuse recognition, and established a hotline that received over 200 calls in its first quarter. David Reeves, our attorney, told me the foundation was the most effective restitution program he had ever witnessed outside a courtroom. I told him restitution was not my goal. Resurrection was. You cannot give a dead man back his life, but you can make certain his life continues to save others. That is the only mathematics of grief that ever balances. On a Tuesday evening in late October, I sat on the back porch with Grace, watching the sun turn the Nashville skyline into copper and gold. She asked me if I was at peace. I thought about the question the way a carpenter examines a joint he has sanded for hours. Was it smooth? Was it true? Was it built to last? I told her, I was not at peace. I was at purpose. Peace is what you find when the war ends. Purpose is what you carry when you know another war is always coming for someone else. She leaned her head against my good shoulder and said that sounded like a sermon. I told her it was. Every true thing I have ever said has been, the last thing I do each night before sleep is look at the photograph on my nightstand. Elijah, at 20-2, the day he graduated boot camp at Paris Island. His jaw set, his eyes clear, his whole life ahead of him like an open road. I press 2 fingers to the glass and whisper the same words every single time. I kept my promise, son. The people who could not fight for themselves found someone who would, and your name is the reason they were saved. Then I close my eyes. And for the first time in 3 years, I sleep without dreaming of funerals.